Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Does this work? Good. Do you hear me well? Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Eva Jensen. Before I start talking, I wanted to know a little bit more about you. Can you tell me, just raise your hands, who is in an undergraduate program at the moment? Okay. Who is in a graduate program? Very good. Who is studying anything else but political sciences? Very good. Can you maybe tell me a little bit what you're studying? Anybody? So that I have an idea. Epidemiology. Wonderful. Wow. I heard law. Development studies. Very good. Excuse me, what was that? Economics. Very. Communications. Oh, also very good. Great. So I get a little bit an overview. Thank you very much. And I'm happy that all of you came here because I will show you in a moment that we have jobs for everybody, no matter what your field of expertise is. In the UN, we are like a little world on our own, and we need people in every area. So let me try to start. Excellent. The basics. You know that we are here to maintain international peace and justice, to promote economic and social development, and to promote and protect human rights. What is we? I mean, you're doing the tour, I guess. You have seen the tables in the basement. We're talking about the UN system. The UN system consists of how many organizations at the moment? Do you know that? 37. And I'm here to represent the United Nations Secretariat. I heard in a panel discussion earlier today that what we are the mothership on Earth here, the UN Secretariat. So we are the ones with the peacekeepers, the General Assembly, etc. You know that. Where do I find it? And these are a few of the entities across the UN system. We call them the agencies, funds, and programs. Why do I mention this? Because every agency has a very specific mandate, but that doesn't mean that we are not one overall. So whatever I say here more or less applies to all the organizations. And the only thing that really differs when you apply for a job is that you need to go for each of the organizations to their own website. We are not yet on one site together for the careers, but hopefully that will come in the future as well. So you see there, for example, the orange one, that is UNFPA, the Population Fund, which sticks out by color. Usually the UN has blue as its color. And this is all of them. You can find that on Google. And a question that I get very often is, where can I apply with what I've studied? And I think when you go to this little chart, you can see already by the name of the organization what would apply to you. So you can do then a little bit of research like epidemiology, right? Obviously, World Health Organization, but eventually also the World Population Fund or UNICEF. I could imagine that they have jobs for somebody like you. So it's a matter of your own research, and don't restrict yourself too much. I think one of the biggest advice I can give to everybody is be flexible. Look into job openings that do not carry a title that you would necessarily think is the one for you, because we have a very generic system and a program officer could fall into any area. So it's worthwhile. I just spoke earlier today at the table at the fair with somebody who has studied economics, and he was looking for an internship online. And he narrowed down from the very beginning to internships in economics. And what he found was, out of 20 internships, 17 in Geneva. And he said, why are they all in Geneva? So if you want to look for other locations, then just broaden up your mind and the online system and check for other internships that might have a generic title but still fit to what you want to do. And the same with regular job openings. You see there the yellow part is the Secretariat. One of the advantages, I think, in the UN, in the Secretariat, but also in the system, is that you can move around a lot. We all move in between organizations, in between offices, between functions. So it's something, if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to, it's something for people who get bored easily. So you can switch around a lot by your own initiative. I think I have to point this somewhere else. The UN Secretariat workforce. We have at the moment around a little bit less than 40,000 staff members all over the world. And we actually are not the organization that have most offices. It's UNDP, and this is another reason why we work so closely with each other, because we don't want to duplicate. So we try to help each other out when we need assistance in a specific location. But opportunity for you to find a job wherever you want to. The workforce facts. I hope you can read this. I will not read it to you, but I think something that is very important here is the average age of 44. So we want to lower this. Many Secretary Generals have said that, and member states also, that the average age in the UN is too high. So the earlier you come and join us, the better. And then another one, the retirement forecast is around 700 people yearly. And that means that there are lots of job opportunities at any given point in time. I will not go into this because you all know what peace operations are. But what I want to stress is that we are more in the field than only the blue helmets. Most people underestimate in which capacities you could eventually work in the field. And you might be aware that, okay, as a lawyer you can go there, or as a doctor. But actually, in all those offices where we try to make peace and maintain peace, we need people who do the HR, the logistics, supply chain, people who deal with, of course, the human rights, civil rights, eventual, let's say, sexual violence, little details in the substance, but a lot of people also who deal with the administrative support. In the Secretariat, we have tried to make it easier for applicants to figure out how they can get in and what would be the right job for them, how to find this job. So we have clustered jobs into networks, really just when you go on the website, for you to make it easier to figure out where to go. Because you will see, if you have not seen it yet, it's careers.un.org. Most people who go there, they're overwhelmed because there's so much information, and it's not really clear if you don't have somebody who explains it to you. What are the categories? What are the options for me? And this is actually why I'm here today, so that I can tell you a little bit more in detail how to navigate through the system. Okay, examples of jobs. Drug control and crime prevention, I've worked there. I'm actually a lawyer by education. Aviation, I find that very interesting. The other day we interviewed a lady who was a pilot in the private sector and then came to us I think she works on aviation regulation. Very, very interesting, and you wouldn't believe that this is part of the Secretariat because you have the International Aviation Association. We have library science, you know, a lot of libraries around the world, actually, which relates to communication. Communication is not only journalism or media. It's also something that happens behind the scenes for diplomats, for staff members, and it's also in various locations in the world. What else do we have there? Oh, security. You will see later I have a slide on security because there is an exam that will happen soon for people who have not more than a bachelor's degree and no work experience. Because usually I think the rumor is that, and it's not only a rumor, in order to get a job in the UN, you need a number of years of work experience. And it's better to have a master's. You don't need the master's degree, but there's a lot of competition, and it's just more realistic to get a job if you have a master's degree. But there's this very special entry program. It's called the Young Professionals Program, which is an exam, which is for people from and underrepresented countries. And I'll tell you in a moment what that is. But basically, you don't need anything but the bachelor's degree and be fluent in English. This is our recruitment priorities. In the Secretariat, we have a little bit of a specialty as to the General Assembly decides everything we're doing. The agencies are a little bit more flexible usually. They follow our good example. But we are very bound in everything we do by the General Assembly. So in 1967, the General Assembly has decided that they want to reserve a certain number of posts, and it's at the moment around 3,500 out of those 40,000, that they want to attribute to the various member states. And the criteria for that are obviously to be a member state of the Secretariat, but then also your contribution to the regular budget and the size of your population. So the bigger you are, the more you pay, the more posts you get, which makes that America, Russia, China, they have a lot of posts. But which makes also that there are lots of small countries who are not only underrepresented, they are sometimes even unrepresented because they have none of their nationals sit on those specific posts. And that gives you a big advantage if you have the nationality of such a country. Every year, there are around 65 out of the 193 member states that are or underrepresented, which is a lot. So it gives special chances to a lot of people. Gender parity, as you know for sure, we have been working towards gender parity for many years, and it's one of the big priorities of our current Secretary General. I work in what we call talent outreach. It's a part of human resources, and we have two major mandates. One is to help member states that are underrepresented, to support them and educate them for their nationals to obtain posts in the UN. And on the other hand, we try to help managers to find the right people who can do the jobs that are not so easy to fill. You can imagine if there's a political affairs officer on an entry level, there are lots of applications. But if you have let's say we are looking for an architect in Afghanistan. In the first place, most architects, they don't know that they could work for the UN, so they will never look at our job openings. And in the second place, find somebody who wants to go to Afghanistan, who sees this as a positive challenge. And then in the third place, find a woman who does that. So yeah, we are trying to help all sides to find to each other. So we have around, and that's the Secretariat only, that does not include the agencies, funds, and programs. We have around 3,000 jobs advertised every year. All our vacancies, including internships, consultancies, any level, is on careers.un.org. And we have, for field positions, rostering exercises. That means that we do not necessarily advertise every individual post, but you will find jobs that say they're generic. You will read that in the job opening, that they're generic job openings, and everybody who applies, who goes through assessment and interview, and who is capable of doing the job, who is vetted in the process, they will be placed on a roster, and the moment positions open up, we go back to those people on the roster, and we don't advertise job openings anymore, and then we offer jobs to those people who are on the roster. The next one is something very interesting. You apply online, and then everybody has to go through an assessment process. And nowadays, this is mostly also online. So you will do a test online. And how do we do those assessments? Before, when we had it in paper, it was like at university. You were tested on your knowledge. Nowadays, because you can Google everything, we cannot test on knowledge anymore, but we rather go into application of knowledge. You know, how do you analyze? How do you draft? What's your judgment and decision making? How do you understand what's your opinion about how you should act and react in certain situations, so that we can decide, you know, would you be a good fit for the organization? We want to see how you think and how you would decide in a certain moment, especially when you're under pressure. And then the interviews are usually nowadays also, well, through Skype or any other video conferencing tool. They're not in person anymore, to save money and to make it fair for everybody, because applicants nowadays come from all over the world, and not everybody can fly into headquarters or wherever the position would be located in order to be there for an in-person interview. But I think for you as the younger generation, this is something that would be easy. I think the people who had to get used to that more was the manager generation. But it's working quite well, I have to say, and we use different tools, and usually there's no, you know, like network interruption or something like that, so that's fine. The interviews, if you come to that stage, one tip is please go again to the website and check out the online learning tool, because in the UN we don't have interviews like in the private sector. We do what we call competency-based interviews. This is behavioral interviews, and you will find millions of videos on YouTube, for example, on that. It's more about, again, you know, who are you as a person, and we try to predict your future behavior on the basis of your past behavior. So we will ask you questions like, let's say the competency is teamwork, right? Easy. The question could be, tell me about a situation in the past where you had to work with a colleague with whom, or you know, like a teammate at university with whom you did not agree, and how did you solve the issue? Simple. But then, you know, you want to be prepared for such kind of interview, and we give you some tips on the website on how to elaborate on the story. Don't talk too little, don't talk too long, what kind of points to bring up, etc. And you see here between 50 and 1,500 applications are received per job. So this sounds a lot, 1,500 applications. I can tell you that it is not 1,500 that come to the hiring manager. What happens is, in my opinion, it's not a statistic, a lot of people don't read. They just apply they see the title and they're like, oh, that sounds nice, I apply for that. So a lot of those applications come from people who are not eligible in the first place. And because of the online system, what happens is that the first screening is done by a software. And when you read through the job opening and you read fully through it, you will see on top the title, and then you see job responsibilities, and this is where most people stop reading. They're like, oh, this is nice, I can do this, no problem. Click on apply. What comes below the job responsibilities is actually the qualification criteria. And it says there education, work experience, and language skills. And then in all those areas, you will see there's a part that says required and a part that says desirable or an advantage, etc. So if it asks you for, let's say, 2 years of work experience and you have 1 year, 300 days, now software is smart enough to count that this is not 2 years and it will screen you out. Or I had now a case, very, very sad, a girl who was in the UN as an intern, super qualified, from Cambridge, a PhD in applied mathematics and some water engineering, a very specialized area, but an area where typically women don't go to. So we were like, oh yeah, great, a girl who does that. And then also she did the internship, so she had the UN experience and she knew that she liked certain positions, and so it was a good fit. And she applied for posts and it didn't go through. And I tried to figure out why, and we realized that she had not taken out in the online form that she had finished her internship, and it said there that she was still an intern. And so the software said, excuse me, but if you're an intern, you cannot apply for positions, and screened her out before any hiring manager or recruiter could see her profile. So it's really, really important when you fill your details, every time you apply, check that it's correct what is written there. Same for the languages. You have no idea how many people make the mistake when they're an English mother tongue speaker that they don't fill the English, they don't tick the boxes. I speak, write, understand, and read English. And one of the requirements is to be fluent in either English or French. It's always there because these are the two working languages of the UN. And then people think, yeah, if I'm English, and it's obvious that I speak English, right? And for us in the UN, it's not obvious. You can hear I'm not an English mother tongue speaker. I'm Austrian. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, so I speak Arabic. But that's also not obvious for somebody who has grown up in a different country. But my son has moved around with me over the world, so he was actually in his entire life 1 year in a German-speaking school. And I know a lot of kids where the parents don't want to make the effort, don't make the effort, or don't think it's important to teach the kids their mother tongue, and then you have a nationality and you don't speak the language. With English, it's maybe less obvious, but we have 6 official languages, and English and French, or English or French, they are the working languages, and you need to be fluent in all 4 areas in one of those 2 languages, so please don't forget about that when you fill in your application. It seems very, very simple, but out of those 1,500, I would say 70% get screened out at the first stage because they make little mistakes somewhere. And then when you look into the work experience, again, first we check on everybody who has the requirements, then we go into the desirables. And if the desirable says experience in, let's say, program management, that could mean a lot. And what we want you to do is examine everything you have done in your life and cater it for the job for which you want to apply. So we want to really hear from you, possibly your transferable skills. If I have written for a magazine, I can eventually also write for the UN in a substantive field. If you have, at university, let's say, you were representing a team or special working group, then you can relate that also to your job later on in any area. So you have team lead qualities, and these are the little things which you want to bring into your profile, into your resume, which is called the personal history profile, PHP, in order to convince us that you could do the job. And as I'm there already, although this is not part of this slide, a lot of people ask me how important is the cover letter. I have read statistics, and this is not a UN statistic, but I think it could apply, of recruiters that get a lot of applications. How much time do you think in average does a recruiter look for the first time through a resume? Give me a number. 10 seconds. Almost there, yeah, 8 seconds. So basically what you do, you have, let's say, 50 applications, you glance through, right? And what is on the first page is the cover letter. So what you want to see on the cover letter is how you can do the job. Why we want to take you rather than somebody else. And I don't know why people put in there, I've seen, I swear to God, it starts with, I am awesome. And you need to hire me. It's not a joke. So what we want to see there is that you have the requirements and eventually some of the desirables, and then a little bit about your motivation. Why do you want to do this job? Not only why you want to join the UN, why this office, this job, and this substance. Okay. Okay, this is a little bit about the life in the UN. Once you're in, how will you feel in comparison to academia or private sector? I think if you go into other areas, it's harder to find what you get in the UN, and this is everything. You know, you can get a job in the UN where you do what you love, you get paid for that, you can do what you're good at, and on top of that, you can do what the world needs. And that will create a genuine happiness. What you see here is a Japanese concept. It's called ikigai. And I think there are very few other jobs, other areas in which you can work where you come to this complete happiness and satisfaction in life. Okay, how would it be in terms of benefits and entitlements? I think this is one of the important questions as well. Mostly, I think what I hear from people, colleagues, you know, when you ask them, for example, law. I have a colleague who he started with the UN, and then he left the UN, which is rare, and he worked in a law firm, and then he came back to the UN. In between, he went to Harvard and got a PhD there, and he came back to the UN, and I met him for a coffee, and I asked, so what is this? Why did you do this? And he said, well, I left because it was on my bucket list. I wanted once in my life to work in a law firm. I came back because, you know, in this law firm, I made hell of a money, much more than in the UN. But I never had time to spend it because I was working day and night. I had never time to spend with my family. I didn't see my 2 babies. And that was not the life I wanted to have. And in the UN, I have a compromise. I have a decent salary, but I have a really good work-life balance. I have a lot of the satisfaction I told you about before. I have, as you can see here, a lot of learning and development opportunities. I have a very family-friendly policies. I can be mobile if I want to, but I don't have to, which is nice. I think for nationals from a lot of countries, what is important in the UN is, or what is better in the UN than in their countries, is the pension benefits. Our pension fund is overfunded and one of the best in the world. Health insurance, excellent, because we need that, because most of us travel a lot, so you need to be covered for everything, everywhere. We have very, very good maternity and paternity leaves. And what you see here, home leave, is that when you are not at home, that the UN gives you special holidays, and they pay you every 2 years if you're in a regular duty station, and every year if you're in a difficult duty station, to go back home to your country for at least a week with your entire family, not to lose contact, you know, psychologically, to be with your family and your friends, reconnect. So that is on top of the annual leave. And then the education grant, which you see here, is for your kids, because you might travel around the world. And what do you do with the kids? There is not necessarily everywhere a school that educates in your mother tongue. So you want to be able to put them into a really good private international school, and the UN helps you pay for that. They help you pay also for mother tongue tuition and boarding, etc., until the child has either a bachelor's degree or is a maximum of 25 years. So it includes even college education, which is really nice. Earlier today, I met a lady who said, "Oh, I remember you. You were here last year with your son." I was here on the stage. I brought my son, who is 18. Sometimes when I go somewhere and there's an opportunity, I bring him, so he can give the aspect of a UN child, to tell you a little bit how it was. Usually, you know, afterwards, people still have questions. His line is always longer than mine. And I think he's here again this year, but I think he's still sleeping. But I give another presentation in the afternoon, and I guess he will come then. And I think what he will tell you is that it can be difficult, right? It can be difficult to go to a new school every so on. But it can be nice also, because there are those UN schools where everybody is like you, and where you learn from the beginning what peace and democracy means, and you learn how to communicate, and you learn about the values that are really important for the United Nations. And being a boy, and I generalize, I think what he appreciates most today is that he has friends all over the world, and whatever time zone he is in, he can always find somebody to play online with him. So, yeah, they're perks. Okay. Oh, sorry. I spoke about this before. So education, work experience, languages, and the competencies differ a little bit from organization to organization, but this is what we will check in the interview. How are you in client orientation? How are you in teamwork, planning, etc.? This is a little bit the years of work experience you would need. The lowest level we typically have for professionals, which is people with a university degree, is a P2 level, and you would need at least 2 years of work experience, and then it goes up. But we have programs where you don't need work experience, and I'll go into that right away. So these are the entry points. We have general service positions for people who have a high school diploma, professionals for people with a university diploma, consultancies, which are more often to be found in the agencies, not necessarily in the Secretariat. And then we have the special entry points. UN Volunteers is an organization that brings in volunteers to other organizations, and despite the name, you're being paid. So that's a good thing. And they have different categories. I think they have a stand also here at the fair, and they can tell you what kind of work experience you need for which category. Internships are typically not paid. And I think what the big advantage about an internship is that you learn a lot about yourself. You really, after that internship, you will know, do I want to work in this office, in this organization? Do I like, let's say, headquarters with its bureaucracy, or do I like the hands-on work in the field? It might be different from what you imagine. So I think an internship is a really great opportunity to figure out more, what you want to do in the future. The Young Professionals Program is, as I said before, for nationals from un- and underrepresented countries. It's all on the same website, so if you go to careers.un.org, you can read more about it. And the Junior Professionals offices is similar, but for those you need 2 years of work experience, and it is sponsored through various countries. So if your country sponsors you to work for the UN, you would do that through this program, usually through the Foreign Ministry. Not all countries do it, but then we have one country that pays for half of its posts for their own nationals, and the other 50% for nationals of other countries. So you might want to look into that as well. This is how our webpage looks like, and you see here, just to remind you, the other organizations, they have different websites. This is a great tool. Once you have set up your profile in the system, you can, in the search function, you can set up a job alert or several job alerts, and then you will get an email whenever a job comes up that interests you. So you don't have to look again and again and again. You will just always receive those emails. Very convenient. I spoke about that before. So basically, you apply online, and then the first screening is done by the software. The second screening is done by recruiters and hiring managers. You will receive, typically, if you fulfill the criteria, an invitation to an online test, which could be, depending on the job, a multiple choice questions and or 1 or 2 essays, like of 1 or 2 pages, which for somebody who studies here shouldn't be an issue. In some countries, essay writing is not really taught. So for those people, it might be a little bit more difficult, but it's really just what you learn at university. It's not unsurmountable. And then the interview, and then it takes some time until you hear back from us. We try to improve that. We try to keep the timeline shorter, and we're really working hard on that. For internships, typically you hear back after a month. For short-term positions, which is like 3 to 6, eventually more months. It's typically maybe 3 months, and then for a fixed-term position, it can take a long time until you hear back, like half a year or something like that. I hear somebody laughing. Heard that? This is just a graph to show you, the un- and underrepresented. The 2 red lines are the range in which the country should be. The blue straight line is the midpoint, and then the dotted line is where this particular country is at. And you see that it's increasing over time. The lower, the rows is the timeline from 2011 to 2017. And why does it go up? Typically because the population grew bigger and the budget contribution also grew. So then they get more posts in the system. Okay, the ingredients for success. I think what I typically advise, because there's this question, what should I do? I'm done with my studies, and now what? Can I get a job in the UN? Should I do an internship? Should I continue study? Do I need a PhD or not? So I would say a master's is good, a PhD is not necessary for the UN. If you want to continue studying, learn another language. That is one of the UN languages. Usually French is really, really sought for. And then the other languages that we look for is, at the moment, Arabic. Eventually Spanish, depending on the duty station in which you want to work. But I think French is really, really, we look for people who speak both English and French. You see here also field experience in conflict and post-conflict environment. Typically, I would say, you don't want to go straight to the UN after your studies. Because once you are in the UN, you will stay there. Most people do. And then you will come to a point in your life where you start being frustrated. Be it because you don't like your manager, be it because you feel that the organization is too bureaucratic, be it because you wanted to get already a promotion and you didn't manage. And then what happens is that people blame the organization, right? And they're like, you're terrible, I'm unhappy, and I don't know what. And if you have collected experience in other areas before you come to the UN, then you know very well, is the grass greener on the other side? And do you want to go back? And then typically people who have the comparison, they will say, well, maybe there were some advantages in the private sector, but in total, actually, I'm pretty happy here. So you want to be able to compare and to see different aspects and try out certain jobs. And then when you have collected the work experience you need for the P3 level, then go for it and get your job in the UN and have a career from there. And the last point here says, keep trying, don't give up. Those of you who might have applied already, yes, there is a lot of competition, and it's not enough to apply once. We all, in the UN system, even when you're in already, and you want to go to the next job, you apply a lot. And you always think about, did I formulate my experience correctly? Can I write my PhD better? Can I maybe get some advice from somebody and another eye who looks at it and tell me, how do I come across? So I think it's a matter of persistence also, and a matter of how you portray yourself, how quickly you're lucky to get the job you want. And that's it for now. And I'm open to questions. Thank you. Yes, please.
Can we apply more than one job posting?
Yes, so the question is, can we apply to more than one job post? Yes, you can apply to as many as you want, and there is no blacklist or anything. I've heard that question before. Just make sure that you really target each application. So don't write the same application to all the jobs, because as a manager you can feel this, that a person has just sent out random applications to all kinds of jobs. Yes, please.
Hi. How does it affect your chances of getting the job if your background or your career experience is mostly in the private sector as opposed to NGOs or
All
government
good,
organizations?
very good. You know, and any work experience that is relevant is seen as an advantage because we want people who have a breadth and depth of experience. Absolutely.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, when you're counting work experience in the UN, is it just your own professional work paid experience, or you can mix that with your internships and your things you've done in the university? Like, do all of them count together as work experience, or it's just the paid big ones you've done?
I think that's a very good question. No, we don't look at whether it's paid or not. So internships are usually seen also as a training opportunity, and this is why we count only half of the time of the internship as real work experience. So if you do an internship of 6 months, then we would count it as 3 months relevant work experience. But other than that, the salary is not important. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I maybe have a bit of a different question in that I was wondering how the moving kind of affects your life in a way. I couldn't help but notice when I was working abroad, many of the higher positioned men had their wives join them. However, many of the women sadly ended up divorced. Sorry, that's just an observation I had. So just wondering if you can.
I like your question. Thank you. It reminds me of a town hall meeting with a former Secretary General where the staff was there, and he was talking about mobility. And he told us a nice thing by telling us that his wife has become a professional suitcase packer. And we were like, oh my God. So it's your choice, you know. It is the wife's choice to do that, in my opinion. And it is your choice to move or not to move. You don't have to. Some time ago, I organized a panel for our young professionals who had made it into the organization. And as the next step, we try to help them have a career, right? So first they come in, and then now what? How can I do the next steps? And I brought in senior managers, and I was recommended to contact somebody from the statistics office who was a director. And we didn't know each other, and I called him, and he's like, are you sure I'm the right person? Didn't you make a mistake? I said, why? And he says, I thought I'm the nightmare of the Office of Human Resources Management. And I said, why? And he says, because for 30 years I've done the same job in the same office, just rose in the ranks. So for now, we don't have mandatory mobility. You don't need to move around. It is really your choice, and you will see. It's kind of a fever that gets you because you want to have the hands-on experience. You want to be with the people on the ground, and then what most people do is they juggle it with, when the kids are at an age where you can do it or cannot do it, depending also on the personality of the children, depending on where the spouse is at that point in time. Very often, one of them takes a time out and then it's the turn of the other one, the next move. I've seen that a lot between couples that, either first the woman, the wife or the husband, they say, okay, I come with you, but then next time it's my turn. I think these are nowadays the realities. It's not that, the wife follows the husband. And actually, another good point, I've done, for some time I was responsible for the spouse support program in headquarters in the Secretariat, and we call them the training spouses, were more men than women. So, now we're modern. Yes, thank you. Let me take maybe also a question from the top here.
Yeah, it was actually just a very short question connected to the previous one. How does PhD education count? Is that counted as work or as education?
Also, very good question. I think it depends on the country in which you do the PhD and what is custom there, and the field of study also, because there are PhDs where you even get paid for lab work, for example. So that would for sure be counted as work experience. And there are some other PhD programs where you cannot really justify that this was work, but it was really just studying and writing a thesis. So I think it's up to the applicant to explain to the UN why you would consider this work experience and less education, rather than it's just a continuation of your education. Does that make sense? Thank you. Yes, please.
How do people usually fund the unpaid internships? Is there like something with Erasmus Plus in Europe maybe, or?
Also, very, very good question. Thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for being nice, because usually I hear a lot of criticism that we should pay our interns. Let me explain to you. You know, again, not our fault. It's the General Assembly. Everybody has to save money nowadays, right? Member states, they cut their resources in their own governments, in their permanent missions, consulates, embassies. So they come to the UN and they say, guys, you know, we cut at home, so we have to cut with you as well. And their budget cuts and their cuts of posts. And then when we come and say, but what about our interns? They say, it doesn't make sense that we, on the one hand, take money away and then we give it for interns who come to you to get to know the organization. We would love to, but nobody has the money. So what happens is that students either get scholarships from their countries, through universities, through their parents, or because they have saved up money. I've seen a lot of students, you know, who go work first, save money, and then they go for an internship. But you can make it also more or less expensive, because you can do an internship closer to home or in a location where life is less expensive. So you can regulate that part a little bit. Also, an internship is between 2 and 6 months. So if you go for 2 months, obviously it's less expensive than 6 months, depending on what your priorities are. In 2 months, you don't learn as much as when you stay longer, and it gives you much more time also to network, I would say. But then, honestly, what I've seen also is people who work at night and then do the internship during the day, or somehow combine half-half. There are some very, very motivated and dedicated candidates for these internships, and they somehow make it happen. I would advise, you know, just do some research on scholarships or some grants you can get for that. There are a number of opportunities. And last but not least, UNICEF has started paying for internships. It's not for all internships, but some competitive ones. But it might not necessarily fall into the area in which you want to work and make the experience. But I think there are options. So let me go down to the floor here again. Yes, please. Just shout, it's okay. Okay, very good question as well. Does the work experience need to be after the completed master, or can it be before? Our rules change from time to time. So at the moment, it's after the bachelor's degree. So once you have completed your bachelor's degree, everything after counts. Yes, please.
Hi. So I'm really interested in the internships, and I've done 2 already that are unpaid. I sort of have 3 questions. Firstly, internship doesn't really lead to a consulting job or a job in the United Nations. And the entry points aren't quite clear as to how to get in. It's sort of difficult, and I know that somebody who has been a consultant for 3 years, they got an offer, but they rejected it because it wasn't particularly great. So
that's a good one. They got an offer from the UN and they rejected it because it was not great.
Yeah, that's like one of the points. Like, it's very rare that you get an offer. So that's like my question on entry points. How feasible is it actually to get in? Because after all your effort into funding internships, finding ways to get in, you still don't get a job. That's sort of my first question. The second question is, like, does a consultant equal a P1 officer? And do you need to have done a PhD to actually work in the higher ranks? And do you need to do like the Polnet exam in order to become a field
Okay,
officer?
there's so many questions here. I didn't do a good job in my presentation, but I only had half an hour. Okay, let me stop you here and repeat the questions and go into one after the other. First, you do an internship, and yes, after the internship or a consultancy, after the internship or the consultancy, there is a rule that says for 6 months after that you're not allowed to apply for a regular position in the Secretariat, but you're allowed to apply for the agency's funds and programs. So this is maybe not known to everybody. Why is that? We want to avoid nepotism. We don't want a manager to say, oh, that's a great intern, let me just keep him. We want to give equal chances to everybody, and only because a person got an internship, which is very easy usually in comparison to a real job, we don't want this to be, you know, the kind of a sneaky way in. So that's the first question. The second question is, how did you formulate this? So how do you actually then get in after all this effort? So a friend of yours was offered a consultancy and then declined because it was not, the payment, right. Yeah. So consultants are paid on a different scheme, either by project or on an hourly or daily basis. It has nothing to do with a staff member regular salary, with the entitlements and benefits, which is typically also the same in the private sector. A consultant is responsible for her affairs, like I get my own health insurance, etc. Right? And then the next question was, do I need a PhD to get into higher positions? Usually not, no. Most people in the UN don't have a PhD, and it does not make once you have a job and you want to get promotions, that is not what people look at. They really look at the main qualifications, and it's very rare that the qualifications ask for a PhD. And then it's the same for everybody. You do the test and you do the interview, and you just need to score high. So I think the area which I've seen where many people have PhDs is economics, but anywhere else, no. And doctors, obviously. Anywhere else, not. Then, what was next? Oh, and you know, Polnet. You said, yeah. Do I need to do the Polnet in order to?
Well, to work in the UN or have a
Okay. So the YPP, we call it Polnet because it's one of the networks, but the YPP takes place in all networks, not only in Polnet, which is political affairs basically. The YPP is just a help for member states and for certain nationals to get an entry-level professional position, but you don't need it in order to get into the UN. It's just an extra possibility, so to speak. So I didn't do it, and I got a regular, professional position.
So it's just part of the YPP, not so that exam is only really for YPP, not really for any other job.
So the YPP is the Young Professionals Program has at the entry level the exam, and the exam takes place in networks, and one of the networks is Polnet, right? Okay.
And is consultant a P1 position or not?
No, the consultant is not a P1 position. P stands for professional. It's a staff member position, but there are so few of those, and maybe 3 in the entire system, that it's hard to find them. Usually we have a number of P2s, which needs 2 years of work experience, but then it really starts at P3 level with a minimum of 5 years of work experience that is required.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, you're welcome. Yes, please.
If you're between 2 bands of sort of work experience, like I have 4 years, which is twice as many as P2, but not quite enough for P3.
Yes.
Is your advice to apply for the P2 position, and will you kind of fall into this trap of being like overqualified?
Oh, that's actually also a very nice question. If you have more work experience than you need for a P2, but not yet enough for the P3, and if you apply now for a P2 position, will you be seen as overqualified? Answer is no, no, and no again. For all those requirements I spoke about, mostly people who apply are hugely overqualified, and we don't look at that at all. So it says a minimum of, but that does not mean that you cannot have more. And also talking about, I told you before about the general service category, which is high school diploma only. We have also there even people with PhDs who applied for the job for personal reasons. And so, no, it doesn't mean at all that we would look at somebody as overqualified. No, we look always for the best possible fit, which is not only the education and the work experience, but also your personality and how it would fit in that office in terms of nationalities, languages, etc. Yes. Hi.
For the young professionals program, if we wanted to apply now, would we wait till next year and give the exam next year?
Yeah, the question is, can I do it again, the exam?
No.
No, sorry.
If we haven't applied this year,
Yes.
we would wait till next year and apply then.
Yes. So usually the exam is once a year in a variety of exam areas, and then the year after it's other exam areas, because we cannot hold the exam in all areas every year. And how do we choose which exam areas? Usually we do a prediction of the future. We try to figure out where will we have empty positions. So which positions do we need to fill? Which exam do we need to have? And this year we have, on top of the regular cycle, usually the exam is in December and the application period is May, June, July. It's 2 months. We have an additional exam this year in security because they figured out they need to fill positions in security affairs. And so on top of the regular process, they're offering now at the moment you can apply for the exam in security affairs. Have a look at it if that's your area of interest. Yes, please.
Hi, would you mind speaking a little bit more about the more professional entry-level jobs? So for example, from P5, please, and then a sort of link to that, how easy is it to transfer between the Secretariat and the agencies or the other way around? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good question. So let's say we talk about P5, P4, P5, D1, which is the director level. Typically, people who apply for that fall into 2 categories. Either they are already a staff member or they are not. And it's the same process as for the others. What we look at in the first place is obviously the qualifications, and then we look at your nationality and your gender. What takes the priority is the qualifications, and then it's just a matter of what's the fit for the office. There is no special thing that would happen for higher level positions, honestly. It's just that you need more work experience, and during the interview is longer because more competencies are being evaluated. The test obviously will be a little bit more difficult, but it's really the same style, and it does not differ very much on the higher levels, honestly. And then the second question was?
About
transferring, right. That's actually, it's similar, If I apply now, I work in the Secretariat, and if I apply for a job in the Secretariat or a job in WIPO or UNFPA, for example, it's the same thing. So in terms of benefits and entitlements, because we all belong to one system, it's just a matter of the contractual service to deal with that. So you're not really bothered by that, honestly. So I would see it really as any other job in the wider system. It's all UN. It's maybe, I think why people move from organization to organization is for the new experience, because the organizations differ in their mandates. So it's more specific. And if I, for example, work in HR and I would go to a different organization, then this is because eventually I can apply my expertise, because in the Secretariat very often we are advanced towards the smaller organizations, so I could go there and help them come up to standard. Or on the other hand, if they have a special expertise in a certain area and I want to grow into that, and I see that in the Secretariat we are handicapped because it's too big, then I would focus on going for such a job. But if, let's say, you're a lawyer and you work first in transnational organized crime, and then you want to go to corruption, then you would just look for an organization where they have more jobs in that area. So it's your personal choice again. And in terms of contractual details, it's very easy. And it happens very often. People do that. Thank you. Yes?
So when it comes to applying for professional positions, how important is it to have done a UN internship beforehand?
That's a very good question. So if you apply for professional positions, how important is it to have done a UN internship beforehand? And I think what I want to say here is to get the job, it's not important. But it's important for you not to have false expectations about what you will get into when you get the real job. I think a lot of people have a pretty idealistic picture of the UN, and then they come in and they see, ooh, it's all human beings with all their flaws, same as everywhere else. And yeah, you can find what you're looking for, but I think also what happens a lot is that people know what they do not want, but they don't know what they want. And then they come to the UN and they expect everything. And an internship helps you with expectation management. I hope that answers the question. I think I have to stop. I will take one more question because, yeah, you have tried it for the longest time. And then we have to leave the room for the next speaker.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are you eligible to apply if you have immediate family working in the UN?
Oh, also a very good question. Are you eligible to apply if you have immediate family in the UN? So, UN as a system is different from Secretariat. In the Secretariat, you should not have mother, father, brother, sister, son, or daughter. These are the 6 you cannot have. But if they work in an agency, you're fine. So, it's relatively okay. And I think I have to stop here, unfortunately. Thank you all for coming.